I'm Julia Fisher. Welcome to the Olive Tree. This week we're in Haifa in northern Israel, a city where Jews and Arabs coexist and where there are several congregations that are steadily growing in number. Some new believers are former drug addicts, and today we hear from one of these. His name is Patrick. He was a heroin addict for 26 years and fully expected his life to end on the streets. But as you will now hear, he's not only alive, but free from addiction. He tells his story to Stuart Fisher.
I did the Aliyah with my parents when I was about 8 years old. It was 1976. I grew up in a family that was totally loveless. And very early in my youth, I started with substance abuses. At the age of 13 already, I was working at the United Nations Rec House and doing the dishes. So I was drinking down the half pints that were coming back, and weed already started at that age as well. And at the age of 14, my father was fed up and he threw me out of the house. Well, he told me just to leave, to get lost, in his words. I packed my things and left. Everything that happened in my life was because I was a rebellious child. I looked always to blame somebody else other than myself for what's happening in my life. At the age of 17 and a half, I wanted to leave Israel because I blamed Israel for everything that had happened to me since I came to Israel. I had a Dutch passport, so I moved to Amsterdam. And in 1984, for the first time, I used heroin. And that was for me like putting on, I don't know if everybody knows what a latex glove is, but when I used heroin for the first time, I was sick as a dog. I remember throwing up all night, but it was like, wow, this is what I was looking for. All the rest was rubbish. I mean, it was nonsense. This is what I wanted. Everything I did in my life was always revolving around drugs. Even though I loved my profession and the school, I didn't know how to do anything without drugs. I was in jail in Spain, in France, in Holland. And in 1990, my father, Hans, actually came to pick me up out of jail in Holland, but I hadn't seen him since I was 15. I only knew one day before they was going to pick me up. I came back to Israel in 1990. In 2003, I ended up on the streets of Tel Aviv because being addicted to drugs, you can't continue it. It doesn't matter how much money you have. You can't continue doing it for years and years and years.
Patrick, you mentioned that you blamed Israel for everything that happened to you, but you come from quite a difficult background, and I wonder if you could just explain a little bit of what you think led you into addiction.
Well, let me just say, first of all, that there is no formula why people use drugs. You use drugs when you're happy, and you use drugs when you're sad. You use them when you're depressed. There is no formula. But I grew up in a family that was totally loveless. I didn't know what a hug was from my mother or from my father. I never was happy to come back from school. I was 33. I remember one day giving my mother a kiss on her cheek and feeling that her skin was just as soft as all my girlfriend. It kind of blew me away. I never knew that. I thought, my mother would have rough and old, dry skin, and that was not the case. But that puts things into perspective. I was 33 in the day. I'd never kissed my mother.
And you're saying that things got to a stage when you were in Tel Aviv. Tell us a bit about where you were then. And it sounded as though things were quite desperate at that time.
Yeah, I just finished a rehab, which was actually a very long program, Ilanot, near Netanya. It's a 1-year program. After 9 months, I was supposed to go to the satellite program, but I didn't want to. I left the rehab, and after 5 minutes in Tel Aviv, I found myself with a syringe in my neck again, and I said, forget it. I can't do it. I'm most probably just going to die on the street. I have been addicted to heroin for 26 years. From that 26 years, 17 of them years, I used to shoot heroin. On my last 5 to 6 years, I was using 3-4 grams a day. I was eating 10 to 15 Clonex tablets. I was drinking a liter, sometimes 2 of vodka. And if I had money left, then I would be using crack, because in the evenings I was also working. I'd sleep 3-4 times a week, not more than that.
So just tell us then what happened next. So you were in Tel Aviv, and How did you come out of that situation you were in at that stage?
Actually, people had always told me about Jesus. It began in English, so I say Jesus because people would walk by and say, Jesus loves you. And in the beginning, I didn't understand it, but it did something to me, just them walking by. Who are these people? Then later on in the years, they started bringing me a warm drink at night when I was begging for money, or a blanket in the middle of the night when I was shivering and needed more money. And so these people intrigued me. About 6 years into the period that I was on the street, I met a brother called Rod Powell, and he told me about messianic programs. I didn't understand what that meant, but because nobody wanted to take me back to rehab anymore, I'm going to say something very sad, but I agreed with all the people that disagreed to take me back to rehab because I was bad for statistics, and the world is about statistics, it's about numbers. And so they used to lie to me on the streets and tell me, no, we don't have room for you, and I used to tell them to stop. Anyway, so Rod told me about the House of Victory, and one day I saw him walking up to me, and we did an interview with Eric Benson on the telephone, and Eric said to Rod, and this is Eric's words, well, Rod, he really sounds wasted, but bring him over, we'll see what we can do. And I still choke up from that because that was a special day. Even though I came very skeptic and really didn't understand, didn't know the Lord, didn't know anything about the Bible, I wanted not to die on the street. But I came there 68 kilos, so I'm 93 now, so it's quite a difference. Eric actually said to Rod, I don't think we have much hope for him. So that was Eric's words. But God had different plans. Assuming that I was in the program already, I figured we better do what they do in the program. The program is Yeshua, Jesus is the program. So we wake up in the morning, we read the Bible, then we have a Bible lesson around 10, 11, and then in the evening or afternoon there's another Bible lesson. But I had no relationship with the Lord, and after about 2 months I was fed up and I wanted to leave. I couldn't understand, I couldn't remember what I was reading, and I was so worried that the drugs had just messed up my short-term memory. I thought, I must be such a mess. That's what my thoughts were. And then I said to Eric, why is this like that? Why can't I remember? And he said something very deep, and I use it many times. He said, the word of the Lord is like a washing machine, and we are all dirty rags. He said, keep on reading, persevere, and one day you will understand, and you will remember what you're reading, and you will even proclaim this gospel to your brothers and sisters on the streets. And so I listened, I heard, and still I was a bit fed up and I wanted to leave the program, but that hung with me. And in that afternoon, the first verse that the Lord gave me was from John 15, verse 16. I chose you, you didn't choose me. And that was totally me, because I was not looking for the Lord. And I thought I was fooling everybody. But I remember that somebody said to me before this that God reads hearts. And then that broke me. In the evening I was on my knees. I said, Lord, אם אתה אלוהי אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, and you chose me, you've got to change me, because I don't know a lot, but I know I can't change myself. I've tried it so many times. I've done between 30 and 50 secular rehabs, so I never succeeded to change a thing in myself. And then I was just at my bed on my knees, and maybe for an hour just sobbing there and saying sorry for 100,000 other things, and my mattress was all like a puddle on my sheets. So that's where my journey started, I think. Every day going in the House of Victory out to the veranda, I'd see the train station, but I'd said, tomorrow I'll go, tomorrow, not today. And then I stayed for 16 months in the House of Victory. And as I said before, I had a hate for Israel. I hated Haifa. The Lord has changed my heart, as the scripture says in Ezekiel 36, that the Lord will bring us back into the land. He will cleanse us with clean water. And then he will give us a new heart. He will take that heart of stone and give us a heart of flesh. And this is something that I know has happened to me. It's exactly like we say, when you're born again, it's an event. You know you've been born again. Doesn't mean you can't sin again, but it's an event, you know. And I know this open heart surgery, I've been through it because I was such a bad person. Growing up in crime and drugs and jails. I don't have to continue to speak, but we really believe that it's a sin issue. Drug abuse is a sin issue, and it boils down to, who do we go to when we sin? Because the Lord is such a good Father, but He wants us to want Him. It's like, I chose you, but we have to choose Him as well. So we have to choose to follow, and it's not always easy. But God is great. He's given me a wife. I never wanted to get married because coming from an abused family, I'm kind of a bookworm myself, and I've read so many articles about abused kids abusing later on that it's just a wheel that you never get out of. So I said, I don't want to get married, and so I didn't want to. But the Lord has given me a wife, a 30-year believer, amazing wife, Sharon. Yeah. I think God is such a great Father to us, and He has a great sense of humor. I hated Haifa. Today I can't imagine living in a different place. This is the best place for me. I love the area, the trees, the atmosphere. God has given me a heart for the Israeli people and the Arab people, of course. So I love evangelizing to the Jews and Arabs. It's all one for me. I can't get enough of it. I'm not the type of person that waits for outreaches. God always sets opportunities in front of us daily. We have tens of opportunities to share the gospel, to share our testimony or the Lord's testimony in our life. If we have a 3-minute, 4-minute, 10-minute testimony, if it's on the bus, in the supermarket, I have a testimony for each occasion. People are looking for the truth, but they're looking for it in all the wrong places, just like I did. And that's why I feel so at home there.
You've been listening to Stuart Fisher in conversation with Patrick. He still has a lot to share with us, so tune in to next week's programme. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work through our bi-monthly newsletter, including news about our upcoming tours, please either visit our website www.olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, OTRF, PO Box 402, Billingshurst, RH14 4BQ in the UK. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.